So welcome to the UCD School of Agriculture and Food Science graduate webinar series. The School of Agriculture and Food Science is one of UCD's largest schools, but we're also one of their top performing ones. And we have more than 81 research active academic staff across a wide range of undergraduate and graduate programs. And they cover right the way across the spectrum of science and business, covering agriculture, food, health, and the environmental chains. So myself, I'm Sharleen O'Reilly, and I'm the Associate Dean for Teaching and Learning within the school. And this evening, we're having our final session, which is about discussing the area of agricultural science and rural development. So I'm excited to have three programs that are going to be discussed here tonight. Before we start on that, I suppose one of the key things to highlight is that this area is very much an important one on the global landscape, and the environment, climate change, meeting our climate targets, as well as things like plant-based diets and sustainable plant production and overall sustainability are definitely things that are important across the world. And now UCD ranks highly in sustainability rankings internationally. And we're also very proud in our school to have an actual research live farm, which is Lions Farm, as well as the Rosemount Environmental Institute on the campus here in UCD. Our school has a very high ranking internationally within agricultural science, and we have a wide and far-reaching alumni community that our graduates can tap into, as well as our graduates being in high demand and being taken up into the workplace very readily, and employers seeing our graduates as being very much work-ready individuals. So let's start with the first of our programs tonight. We'll start with the MSc in Wildlife Conservation and Management, which is also offered at a certificate and a diploma level. And tonight we have Thomas Cummins talking about that program. And we're also going to have Thomas talking later on about another program. So we'll have two presentations by Thomas, or chats by him, and then we'll have in the middle Mary Harty. So let's kick off with you, Thomas. So feel free to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about the program.
Thanks very much, Sharleen. So as you've mentioned, I'm Thomas Cummins, and I'm representing the one-year taught Masters in Wildlife Conservation Management. The director of the program is Barry McMahon, who's a wildlife specialist and has led this program for many years. The program's strengths are around management of wild populations. A unique feature, which really isn't anywhere else, I think, is in epidemiology and zoonoses, so the transfer of diseases between animals and humans. The concept of One Health, all about health of animals, health of humans, and health of ecosystems, again, around the zoonotic disease transfer. And resolving human-wildlife conflicts and a global perspective on that. The entry is a requirement is a 2-2 degree in a level 8 degree in biology, environmental science, animal science, equine science, or veterinary medicine. And the graduates typically go into jobs involving wildlife directly or indirectly, so in environmental consultancy as wildlife managers or rangers, park managers, or maybe as policy officers. In the 2024 class, currently, the research project, which is 1/3 of the program, it's a student selected project. It's happening in the summer, so students are just starting that now. There's projects on trout, on wolves, on zoonoses, on habitat conservation, on birds, on deer, on slugs, with some other colleagues, and pollinators. So a wide range of projects available, again, student selected projects. So it's quite a unique degree, and has, it's obviously centered around wildlife and wildlife management, but with this strong emphasis on zoonotic diseases and zoonoses.
Oh, thanks very much. So I might go to Mary now, and Mary is the director of the MSc in Horticulture, which too is available at the certificate and the diploma level, as well as the master's. So Mary, if you'd just like to introduce yourself as well as the program, that'd be fabulous.
Great, thanks, Sharleen. Yeah, I'm Mary Harty, as you know. I'm the program director for the Masters in Horticulture, which is the only Masters in Horticulture in the island of Ireland. I suppose horticulture is one of those subjects that people kind of know, but they don't really understand fully. So to bring it back to basics, it's the cultivation of plants for human use. It's divided really into two aspects. One is producing ornamental plants, which covers all the plants that are used to beautify our landscape. So any plants in our parks, inside and outside our public buildings, in sports grounds, schools, universities, hospitals, private gardens. So it includes things like shrubs, trees, herbaceous plants, bulbs, turf grass, even Christmas trees. And I think one of the things that became clear during COVID was how important these landscapes are. When we were restricted to our local area and we were needing to connect with nature in our local green space, it has been observed that our mental and physical health increases when we spend time in nature. So our stress levels drop, our blood pressure drops, even our length of stay in hospitals reduce. So this is an area called horticultural therapy, which is a growing area of interest. And we have a PhD student at the moment doing her thesis on horticultural therapy, making it a prescribable therapy for practitioners, which is very exciting. The other main aspect is the cultivation of plants for food. And I mean, there are so many topics you could fall into here. I mean, food security, essential if we're ever to feed the growing number of people on the planet, and producing food sustainably is very much the focus in horticulture. Concern about the environmental impact of our food production, the amount of land being used, the amount of water being used to produce food, and the amount of emissions from food. So there's a real trend now where people are moving away from consuming so much meat and towards plant-based diets, not necessarily becoming vegan overnight, but reducing the frequency of meat consumed in the diet. So in horticulture, we're looking at switching protein to meat alternatives like mushroom, vegetable protein, legumes, nuts and seeds, which use a lot less land and resources than the production, for example, of meat and dairy. Novel crops is also an interesting area. Climate change means that staple crops that we currently rely on don't always grow so well under climate change. For example, in 2023, our potato production, which is classic Irish production, is down 12.5%, 46,000 tonnes. And really popular varieties that we would be known for, like Hearst Pinks and Golden Wonders, are just not available at the moment. The area of planting under winter cereals is also down, almost 35,000 hectares, and the yields are reduced. And that's all been driven by unfavourable weather and climate change. So it's really, really important that we research the growing of novel crops. And while they're not novel today, they could be the future staple crops. I think one of the things across both the food and ornamental production is that we need to increase the use of circular resources, particularly in relation to sustainable plant cultivation. So, for example, we were looking at reducing peat as the growing media of choice within the industry to more sustainable alternatives like composted bark, composted green waste, peat dilution, peat recycling, hammer milling materials like miscanthus and short rotation coppice willow. And we've got ongoing research in this area. We're also looking at producing food crops using a range of approaches: traditional, growing in soil and growing media; hydroponics, where the plants are growing in a nutrient solution and never touch soil; or vertical farming, where plants are growing on shelves under LED lights. We have a Farmony vertical farm unit here at UCD, which is a commercial unit for experiments, and we're looking to supplement heat supply by redirecting heat sources, like, for example, the heat produced by cooling a rack of servers to supplement the heat sources in the vertical farm. Another area is biodiversity and conservation. It's a very, very important part of horticulture. And there's a big focus in the industry on environmental horticulture, which is minimizing the use of chemicals and fertilizers, planting perennial rather than annual species to reduce inputs, and management practices like the reducing or indeed no mowing of our public and private grasslands. And this is contributing greatly to the availability of nectar and pollen for our pollinators. Another important role in biodiversity and conservation is the propagation of rare and endangered species, and then using these plants to repopulate the wild stands. One of the critical things in commercial horticulture is the use of technology. There's been huge consolidation of growers in the fruit and vegetable sector. So we now have some really huge players in this country. So if you think of organizations like Fifes or Total Produce or Keelings, they're extremely large, extremely sophisticated, and extremely efficient operations. And for them, the use of technology is essential to allow the optimization of every stage of their growing process and their supply chain. So we need graduates who know how to grow and how to optimize growing conditions, fertigation, atmospheric CO2, temperature to maximize yields. So I suppose if I was to summarise the Masters at UCD, I would say the programme covers a wide range of horticultural topics. And as our students also understand the science behind horticulture, they end up with a lot of transferable skills to work in a wide range of roles in horticulture. And there's space within the programme for students to focus and specialise in the area they're interested in most, in a similar way to the wildlife Masters, using the minor thesis over the summer months. Again, our curriculum is led by researchers and lecturers who are active in areas like botany, manipulation of plant processes, biodiversity and conservation, as I mentioned, nutrient cycling and emissions, use of sensors and new technology, fruit and post-harvest physiology, as well as biostimulants that promote plant growth and health, and biopesticides to deal with pests and disease. So our programs are constantly subject to change. Modules are always being updated, new modules being added and old modules being retired. So in terms of the opportunities for graduates, it's not just about expertise in growing plants, which is what I think sometimes people can associate with horticulture, but our postgraduate students develop very transferable skill sets and work in a variety of roles, from government policy, as advisors to industry, managing landscapes, in research, in teaching, as entrepreneurs and owners, in a range of enterprises, in design, in landscaping, in nursery management, in retail, in horticultural therapy, and increasingly in broader sustainability roles as well.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Mary. So we might go back to Thomas for the programme. He is the programme director for us. So this is the MSc Environmental Resource Management, which, like the others, is available at a certificate and a diploma level as well. So over to you again, Thomas.
Thanks again, Sharleen. So Thomas Cummins here again. I'm the director of the one-year taught Masters in Environmental Resource Management. This programme has been going for a long number of years. It centres around biodiversity and ecosystem services and land management, broadly for environmental purposes within agricultural landscapes. Environmental assessment, environmental impact assessment is a key module in it. Our graduates tend to work in environmental consultancy and advisory, maybe environmental engineering, or habitat evaluation in advance of engineering projects, also in regulation and widely in the heritage industry. The entries requirements a 2-2 level 8 degree in biology, environmental science, agriculture, geography, or earth science, earth or natural sciences. And we take quite a broad view, in fact, beyond that list, to allow entry from an fairly unlimited range of cognate disciplines. So that would require checking in advance, but we'll consider disciplines and quite broadly, and especially in line with any experience or the personal statement that goes with the application. Current projects that are underway, the students undertake a 30 credits, so a summer-long project. They select their own project and work individually with a supervisor on that. So those students are just starting out on that now for this summer, the 2024 class. And their topics include nutrient management, so agricultural nutrient management, droughts, effect on drought in an experimental situation, multi-species swards. This is a big area of a slight tweaking of our agricultural production system to reduce nitrogen inputs by having more species in the sward, including nitrogen fixing species and deep rooting species, giving greater drought resilience and reduced emission of nitrogen greenhouse gases. Wind farms, birds, pollinators. So we have a group of academics feeding into this program with quite wide interests. So there's also a fair bit of overlap with the wildlife program that I mentioned earlier. The first term is largely common between those two programs.
Super. So I suppose one of the key questions that a lot of people ask is, where have our graduates gone to in terms of employment once they finished these programs? So I don't know, Mary, do you maybe want to give us some sort of background of where our graduates have gone to?
Yeah, it's a mixture really, Sharleen. quite a few have gone to the Department of Agriculture and work in roles where they either advise on policy or they're out doing agricultural inspections. Some of them have gone to Teagasc and have worked as advisors, or have gone into the research side and more academic, done their PhDs and traveled down that route. Some have gone into industry. So we've had people go to work for growers, and then some people have set up on their own. So it's a real range. And I think that the benefit of doing the benefit of these type of programs is you get a range of people who've come from the same discipline and want to deepen their skills, or people who've come from a different discipline and want to transfer into. So you get a lot of mature students, which is always great to incorporate that experience into the cohort. So yeah, a real range. It's very difficult to do, and of course teaching. I'm one myself, so.
Always good to see. So Thomas, do you want to speak about either program and where kind of people have gone to?
Yeah, well, from the wildlife program, people have gone into wildlife management quite a lot, and those roles would tend to be very outdoorsy, dealing with with lone working, working in open areas, working in forests, and dealing with wildlife management. So there'd be a lot of interaction with hunters, for example, in some of those roles, maybe not all of them. There's a definite terrestrial emphasis in this program, so not into fisheries management. That's not a core part of the program. People would also have gone into institutional roles in policy advice and into assisting, for example, county councils or state agencies in managing open areas, and especially into the National Parks and Wildlife Service. I suppose that's closest to the program, where conservation rangers or park rangers would with the wildlife qualification would be very suited to those kind of roles. If I can just jump straight over to the environmental resource management program. Two main routes for our graduates have been into state institutions, and especially the core, I think, in that would be the Environmental Protection Agency. So the state's role in managing environments, but that is often delegated more locally. So county councils have a lot of environmental roles, especially in water quality. So a lot have gone into water quality there, or water quality with Irish Water, Uisce Éireann. The other big area is in environmental consultancy. So this would be examining habitats, existing states of land, maybe before developments or maybe peripheral to development. Let's say if there's a big emitting site, and to look at sites around that. So that would be environmental consultancies, which again have two further divisions, I suppose. There's the ones that cluster around engineering, which are related to projects and developments and big infrastructure sites, and then the agricultural consultancies. There's a large industry, I could say, of agricultural consultants in Ireland, and they would often deal with schemes around environmental inputs to agriculture. So that's another route. The closest or most central to the ethos, if you like, of the environmental resource management is around agri-environmental management. So fully integrating agricultural production and agricultural values, especially rural livelihoods and community stability in rural areas, embedding that with environmental objectives such as water table management in peatland landscapes, including agricultural peats, or broadening the biodiversity value of agricultural land, maybe in semi-natural grasslands. So the main manifestation of that at state level is the Acres program. Some of the ancestors of that program have come from our degree, the Masters in Environmental Resource Management.
Okay, super. So I have a question here, and I think it's for you, Mary. So as a person wanting to know if there are internship opportunities after you completed the Masters in Horticulture.
You mean at UCD or within the industry?
Well, it's not specific, but it's
Yeah.
more, I think, maybe just broadly.
Yeah, there are. I mean, we've had students. Part of the undergraduate program is the PWE, the professional work experience, and all of those students go and spend 14 weeks working for an industry. So we've got a lot of good links with industry. So there's always the opportunity to go and get that experience, that hands-on experience of working with industry. Most people like to split that up, so not necessarily doing all of their program in one with one agency. So some might go to an advisor for a while and then work for a producer for a while. So it really is very tailored for the individual, so how they want to spend their time. But in terms of the master's degree, it's not included in the degree, the work experience, but we certainly have the relationships with industry. So if people are interested in following on their degree with an internship or getting experience from a particular type of enterprise, then by all means, that's something that we can help arranging.
Yeah, that's super. That you have those established relationships
Exactly.
that we can leverage. Okay. So I suppose one of the other questions that I've been, asking at the other sessions is really, is there any opportunities to access things like scholarships or other programs to help support students to engage in these types of graduate training programs? So I don't know if there are any particular ones, or is it just more broadly the UCD scholarships?
In horticulture, certainly it's the UCD scholarships. There's no specific ones, but again, this is subject to change. So I would say get in touch if you're interested in the program, and we'll see what's available, because it does change from time to time.
In the MERM program, the Masters in Environmental Resource Management, we have occasional students who have got the Irish Overseas Aid scholarships. So the Irish Aid scholarships, they're country linked. So there's a small set of countries where that scholarship applies. But so the Irish Aid scholarships are a route for full funding, but for limited geographical range. But they've been very helpful in some cases.
Super. And then I've a question here. Is the PWE also available for the environmental resources management graduates?
Yeah, just to emphasize what Mary said, we're deeply involved in professional work experience, but not in these programs. These programs don't have a work experience component in them. So similar to Mary, I'm involved in professional work experience for our primary degree, our undergraduate degree in agri-environmental sciences. So because of that, we have a long list of and a dynamic set of connections to industry who take on our students. Now, there are specific supports, I suppose supports for employers in terms of insurance and the relationship when the work experience is embedded in the degree. It's a module in the degree. So that's not the case with these master's programs. So while we have the links and we can provide links, we can of course, I'm not promising anything for Mary here, but I'm certainly happy to look at CVs and talk to people towards graduation and look at connecting them to potential employers, and we have various careers events as well. So but it's outside the degree, so we don't have that specific support for internship. So it's really the employment market we're talking about. Increasingly we have pushed for internships to be paid. So the idea of having a, let's say, unpaid work experience, we're moving away from that as much as possible now, because it is work, even if you're training. We will also post graduate opportunities. So apart from the wider marketplace of employment, there are and we have closer contacts, I suppose, in academia, and there are often PhD offers, which we tend, when we get them, to post to our students. So we will pass them on, and that's a much smaller market and more specific. But if students in these master's programs are interested in further research, and a PhD isn't for everybody, it's a major career move and it's a huge commitment. But we do support the track into PhD in the sense that a lot of it is supported by personal connections, and being known in the research community is good for that. And we do. It's not a formal process, but we're well embedded for people on a PhD track.
Yeah,
And I
that's
would say as
super.
well, I'd say as well, Sharleen, that there are particular relationships with employers where they keep coming back to us time after time saying, do you have anybody who might be interested in this particular role? So they would have roles or a series of roles, and they would come back. So we would advertise those to our graduates as well. So a bit like Thomas, we do maintain those links, and we do have good relationships. So that tends to be very, very helpful when it comes to linking graduates with potential employers.
Yeah.
Quite a few of our students undertaking their research projects would also pick up a specific relationship with a potential employer during that. There's no guarantee for these kind of approaches, but employers love to hire somebody they know already.
Yeah.
So there is that possibility of a route through a project.
Yeah, and the other thing, I suppose, just more widely within these types of engagements with outside organizations, it is a chance for both sides of the equation to get, you can build your network through the people that you're potentially doing research with, and see that as a way of broadening your connections that potentially might lead you to an avenue where you might want to go in the future. If UCD doesn't have a connection, then your network might help you actually make those first steps post-graduation. So I think it's quite nice. And then the other thing is UCD does have a really nice careers part to our services, so that students can access those other services that are more central to help you get ready to go out into the workplace. So I think there's quite a lot of services that you can access as a student that you won't necessarily have access to in the real world post graduation. But while you're a student, and generally when people go back as a master's student, you're a little bit more clued into the employment market and can hopefully use those services a little bit more effectively. So I have two questions here. So I've one regarding horticulture, and it is, does horticulture come under a critical skill visa? And they wanted to know if that was the case. You might know that, Mary, or not.
I'm not sure. I'm presuming this is somebody who's coming from international, wanting to
Overseas,
enter into Europe. I'll have to check that. I'm not 100% sure, but I'll share my email address or my contact details at the end of this. So if you want to contact me directly, then we can follow that up.
And to be honest, as far as I'm aware, those lists do tend to change as the government decide. There's gaps in the labour market, so sometimes it's just easier to keep abreast of the site yourself, because they do change quite regularly depending on where the flow of employment is going. So there's another question here, which is the minor thesis always done in the summer months? And I'm assuming that's directed to you, Thomas. It might not be.
Yes, the answer for that is yes. That will probably change next year. In 2025, we've made some restructuring, and we've combined some preparatory work for the thesis activity into the start of the year. So it will be possible to get started sooner, depending on the individual project. The projects are individual, they're student selected. We do have an offerings session, and it'll be in week 3 of term, so it'll be in the start of October next year, in the coming year, I should say, when the academics in our small group will offer their projects, but students are free also to work with academics from elsewhere, including outside UCD and maybe in industry, with a UCD supervisor as well. So in 24-25, it'll be possible to get started on the supporting and beginning work for the research project sooner. Now, the structure of programs is a set of modules, and the modules are delivered in specific trimesters, and the module has to be complete in the specified time. So that is scheduled for the summer currently. Now, we do have a good bit of flexibility, but I don't want to offer too much. One of the flexibilities we would have is that people who come from outside Ireland can potentially, if they arrange it and if structure is in place, do their project at home in their home country or in some other country if the structures are there, and it all has to be agreed and planned. But we are for this year starting to broaden the time available. So if somebody has a seasonal based project where they need to do something over winter, now usually summer is great for growing season and that's better time. We're always constrained by the length of the time of the project if it involves plants, for example. So the short answer is no, you can't do it outside summer, or yes, it does occur in summer, but there's some emerging flexibility. I run the research project module in the 2 programs that I'm here representing. So I would suggest if you're in one of the 2 programs, come and talk to me early and we'll see what we can work out. There aren't very tight controls. The assessment is completed in the summer, but maybe we can do something about that.
And for horticulture, the answer is similar. We would also do the minor thesis over the summer, and we haven't moved towards what Thomas is doing in the other programs of moving the literature search and things like that into the earlier phase. Everything is completed in the summer period. But again, I run that minor thesis module. So again, there's an element of flexibility, but if your project is lab-based, again, you can do that work in a lab abroad, or if yours is a desk study, that can be done abroad. If there's some growing to be done, again, all of that can be done abroad. So it doesn't necessarily mean it has to take place in Dublin in the summertime. It could be somewhere else. There is some flexibility, but again, the project is assessed at the end of the summer. So you know, if you don't complete it, obviously, then there's a delay in the graduation.
But what Mary's expressing, I think, is the informality and familiarity of our programs. We have rather small classes; they're not very big classes, and there's a lot of contact with lecturers. So there's a lot of time to work out individual needs and to you know, where flexibility exists to tailor specific needs for that. There's plenty of opportunity, quite unlike a big primary degree program where there's a class of 200 and there's no contact with lecturers. So very different from that.
Yeah. And so just in relation to that kind of piece, I mean, these programs are delivered in face-to-face mode. I'm getting that right. I mean, there is some delivery online for components, blended, but they are classified as face-to-face delivered programs. Yeah. So as a result, the students enrolled in these masters would qualify for the 2-year stay back program afterwards. So that's a bit of an advantage to students who are coming from overseas, that, you know, they would be eligible to qualify for that type of visa. So not only will you hopefully during your program get a handle on what the Irish situation is like in terms of the environmental and horticultural sort of background of where the country is. If you weren't familiar with the landscape, then you've got kind of up to the 2 years to do this, to work in the country using your newly acquired skills. So that's a bit of a benefit, I suppose, to these programs as well. One other thing I wanted to just maybe highlight to the students is, I suppose we briefly touched on it as I was starting the thing, was in terms of the level of academic excellence that we have in this area. So I don't know if you wanted to highlight some of the areas of expertise that we have within the teaching program for your programs. Are there any particular areas that are particularly well known?
Maybe I can go first there in the environmental resource management program and the wildlife program. We have access to the same group of academics, but on the environmental side, there's expertise, especially in invertebrates and insects. So there's a lot of interest in that. And the other areas would be soil biodiversity and agricultural environment, agricultural nutrient management. So there is a tendency for us to emphasize agricultural backgrounds, partly because of our own agricultural landscape, but some of that is transferable. So there are specific strengths in the wildlife. Barry McMahon is the main focus for the wildlife activity, and a lot of his contacts in industry have input to the program. So there's a lot of input from specialists and experts in the bird area, especially. So there's several invited and guest lecturers routinely come in on the wildlife program.
I suppose in horticulture, we have, again, number of active researchers. Carolina Elliott-Kingston is a botanist, and her area of expertise is in manipulating plant processes. So she's very focused on the way plants react to environmental stresses. Nolene Smith is our biodiversity and conservation expert, and she's the Irish government representative for CITES. I myself am interested in soil nutrient cycling and measuring emissions from soil and the use of sensors and technology. Bilal Hussain is our expert in fruit and post-harvest physiology. Aisling is our biostimulants expert. So her area of research is looking at the use of non-chemical fertilizers, so using microbial, so bacteria or fungi to promote plant growth and health, so make the plants healthier, so you have to provide less artificial stimulant, let's just say, and then using similar bio microbes to deal with pest and disease as biopesticides, and that's Tony Twomley. So you know, as I say, there's a good range of expertise, and as we increase our staffing, the new expertise is added into the mix, and hopefully will contribute to, as I say, updating modules, adding new modules, and retiring old modules. So trying to keep the whole thing as fresh as possible.
Super. So I've got two questions here. So the first one is, are there any field trips or practical elements as part of the Masters in Environmental Resource Management?
Yes, we do have field trips. It's always the best fun is on the field trips, and students certainly feedback to say the field trips are some of the best parts. We're trying to get more early on in the academic year. We do have several in the later year. One of the strengths of UCD of our school is UCD Lyons Research Farm, which is a fully functioning working farm. It is also a big research centre. So that's an area that we have access to and we make use of. We have the Wicklow Mountains on our doorstep, so we have forest and heathland and peatland landscapes there. And a highlight in the MERM program is a residential field school that we have right at the end of the program in the Burren in County Clare, which is a very interesting epikarst landscape with limestone pavement, and a very abundant plant flora, and a unique local agriculture system that supports this great biodiversity. And it's the origin of the agri-environment program that's really has been the exemplar of integrating environmental and especially biodiversity needs fully into agriculture in a way that supports the farmers, supports the community, and gives gives the land managers, the farmers, input into the planning and decision making of their activities. So the MERM Burn trip, it's a 3-day summer school, is very much appreciated by everybody. So we have shorter field trips before that.
Great.
And I guess,
oh, sorry, Mary. Do you want
I was
to
just
go ahead?
I was going to say, yeah, we do field trips as well. Just generally speaking, it's to understand commercial growing operations. So we take students on a lot of field trips to meet growers and see and understand their operations. Also to the botanic gardens, to nursery stock growers, to our colleagues in Teagasc. So there's lots and lots of opportunities to take a broader view as to what's going on, stuff that you won't learn in the classroom, that you'll get a much better understanding of the kind of operations that you might meet in the industry. So yeah, so we would do similarly field trips, very important part of the program.
Yeah, it really makes the sort of learning come alive, I think.
Absolutely.
So we have another question here about while doing a master's, do you have the opportunity to get a teaching assistantship? So I don't think that's really something that we offer in Ireland. So
no, I think if you're doing a research master's or a research like a PhD, then the opportunities come up, but not on the taught programs.
Yeah. And then there's one more, which is, which course would be best suited to someone with an interest in botany within habitat restoration?
Well, if I can plug the Environmental Resource Management Masters again, I think that might be one. Of course, anyone considering these should look widely. Central to our program, this is the Environmental Resource Management Program. Helen Sheridan has worked on diversity in rural landscapes and specifically in pastures, and she was involved in the Grasses of Ireland book, identifying the range of grasses in the country. So what she has done is habitat evaluation and assessment, habitat mapping within agricultural landscapes, and using that as an input along with heritage varieties and plants that have previously been cultivated to increase the diversity in managed pasture swards. So the multi-species swards that have come from Helen and from her research group are actually changing the landscape of Ireland, not dramatically because it's still very green, but if you look closer to pastures, new pastures that are being developed now, and it's not everywhere, but the intensive farmers are taking the multi-species swards on. They look a bit weedy, because there's more plants in there. So leafier plants with deep roots and nitrogen fixing plants as well. So there's a botanical component in that, and Helen's habitat mapping goes wider. But there's very strong botanical expertise in the horticulture degree. So maybe you can emphasize that again, Mary.
Yeah, and again, I suppose in terms of habitat restoration, part and parcel of that would be the growing of the plants to kind of supplement the stands of plants that are depleted. So Nolene, this is her very strong area of interest, and she's been involved in doing some projects down in Wexford where there's endangered species, and I've just forgotten the name of it off the top of my head, but she's been involved in propagating very, very rare species in dunes behind beaches, and then repopulating those because it's only found in that one particular location, and then repopulating those stands so that the plants can thrive then and survive in the real world. So I suppose that aspect of conservation, if the botanical aspect is of interest, that's also available in the Horticulture Masters.
That's super. Well, listen, we've had lots of questions, which has been fabulous. I suppose one of the key things to highlight is that within the school, if you go to our website, which is agfood.ucd.ie, you'll be able to link into things like the student and graduate testimonials that we have on our YouTube channel. You'll also be able to see the cutting edge research that we have going on in the school. And there's, for anyone who is a graduate of UCD, we have an alumni page, which again builds those networks for people and helps them to form those connections around employment, but also maybe wider, professional development. And as I mentioned, there's the scholarships information section at UCD in the kind of homepage area. And if you look for scholarships in the search tab, it should bring you to that page if you're interested in that space. For the broader scholarships that are potentially available. So I don't know if anybody has any other further points they want to raise from either of the course directors, but if not, we might call this session closed. No? Okay. Well, listen, everyone, thank you so much for attending this evening, and hopefully it's answered your questions. But if you have further questions, absolutely feel free to reach out to the course directors. We very much have an open door policy here at UCD, so when we welcome any inquiries, and hopefully if you have a specific question, we'll be able to give you the answer if you go to the person for the programme that you were interested in. So I look forward to hearing from you in the future, and thanks very much for your time. Bye now.
Excellent. Bye.